very warm welcome to our webinar on the new digital tax that India has recently introduced. Thank you for taking the time out for this webinar today. In this webinar, we will slice and dice the key provisions of this new law, do an in-depth analysis of the applicability of this new law to various foreign businesses interacting with India in the online space. This webinar, we believe, is timely and extremely topical because this law was enacted less than 15 days back. This is all the more important to take note of because the Indian government generally has been very consultative with the industry players before enacting a law or modifying the same substantially. However, this law has not really seen that policy dialogue by the government with the Indian players, and it has just been 15 days that we have really had a chance to look at it. This webinar, therefore, is our attempt to help you as the business owners and the tax teams of Indian and foreign businesses to understand the scope of this law and do a prima facie evaluation of its applicability to your business models. My name is Jimmy Bhatt, and I'm a principal associate in Khaitan's Direct Tax Practice Group, and I'm your master of ceremonies for today. With me, I have our experts from direct tax and privacy law practices, whom I will be introducing very shortly. But before that, let's do a couple of housekeeping checks. This webinar will broadly have two parts. In the first part, for about 40 minutes, we will take you through our presentation and our analysis of this new law. Following that will be a panelist Q&A session for approximately 20 minutes, where we'll answer the questions posed by you so far, as well as the questions that may come up to you during the course of this session. You may send us the live questions by typing them in the questions box in the webinar portal. You don't really have to wait till the end of the portion to really drop us your questions. We'll try as much as possible to really answer all their questions during the next 1 hour. But in case we do miss out on that due to time constraints, rest assured that we will reach out to you separately over an email and address with our responses. I would also at this point like to mention that all the panelists and the team members for this webinar are working from home, like most of you we believe, and they are joining this from separate locations. While we endeavor to bring the best possible experience of this webinar to you, there is a possibility that there may be some technical issues or service interruptions. Request you to please bear with us while we try to fix them as and when, and hopefully not if they arise. If at any point in time we do lose a presenter, we'll move on to the next speaker and then bring you back to the presenter as and when that person is online. Without further ado, I introduce you to our speakers for today. Today we have Vinita Krishnan, Ritu and Supratim as our panelists. Vinita is a director and Ritu is a partner in the direct tax practice of Khaitan and Company. Both Vinita and Ritu individually bring about more than a decade of rich experience in advising on international tax matters, transfer pricing, transaction tax, and inbound and outbound investments from India. We also have Supratim, who is also a partner at Khaitan and Company in the corporate and journal commercial practice at Khaitan. He specifically specializes in information technology and data privacy protection laws. Supratim has been very closely tracking the formulation of the upcoming Personal Data Protection Bill of India. In fact, he is amongst the very few in India to have been directly contacted by the Government of India for additional comments on the bill and related matters. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ritu, Vinita and Supratim. Looking at the next slide, I'll just quickly take you through the broad agenda that we intend to cover in this presentation. We'll start with giving you a broader perspective of how India has really dealt with taxing digital transactions. We'll take you through the core part of this presentation and the subject matter of this presentation, which is equalization levy, the law as it stood before 15 days, and the law as it stands today. We'll do a quick comparison for you to assess the difference. Thereafter, we'll specifically do an in-depth analysis of this widened scope of equalization levy, which we believe are relevant to your specific business models. Thereafter, we'll take you through key considerations and open issues which still remain while we deal with this new animal. Of course, we will deal with your question and answers once we are through with discussing the key considerations. And you please keep your questions handy and do drop us a line on that in the questions box so that we can take it appropriately in the Q&A session. To take you quickly through what India's position has been with regard to digital taxation, we move on to the next slide. India has seen substantial litigation on matters relating to digital transactions, be it a website being held as a permanent establishment in India or relating to royalties or fees for technical services rendered by people outside India. To address these aspects to some extent, India has looked up to the OECD and G20 nations, and from the 2015 OECD BEPS Action Plan report, India has plugged out one of the solutions available there in the form of equalization levy. So India codified equalization levy as a levy or a tax in the year 2016. A unique aspect of this law at that point in time was that India was the very first country to introduce a tax of this nature. Also, the kind of services that India really targeted for equalization levy purpose were very narrowly defined. We will come to that later. Ritu will take us through exactly what it was then and what it stands today. But moving on, in the year 2018, India has also made certain amendments in the domestic tax law, whereby it has increased the scope of taxable business presence in India for foreign entities. But those rules were not notified yet, and therefore they were effectively non-existent for foreign players in India. Come to 2020, we have a very widened scope of equalization levy, which is the core matter of this presentation and webinar today. So India has now widened the scope of equalization levy beyond the narrow scope of specified services which it had notified in the year 2016. And parallelly, India has also, of course, widened the scope of taxable business presence in India, but that has been deferred to the subsequent year. So we'll not be dealing with that in detail in this webinar. Without further ado, to just take us through the key legal provisions and how they really make sense to a foreigner, I hand over the presentation to Ritu. Ritu, over to you, please.
Sure, thank you, Jimmy. So let's spend some time on what the scope of equalization levy was until it was amended by Finance Act 2020. So that time equalization levy was restricted to online advertisement services. So looking at this illustration where India Co is making a payment to a US company for hosting its advertisements online, this payment would attract equalization levy at 6%, which the India company will have to withhold and remit the balance to US Co. Here in this illustration, US Co has no presence in India. It has a server located outside India. Now, let's compare it with how the income tax provisions will play out when we look at an arrangement of this nature. And what was the objective of the government to introduce equalization levy? Now, ignoring equalization levy provisions for a minute, if we only focus on Income Tax Act, then Income Tax Act contains certain source rules when it comes to income which non-residents earn from India. And the three income streams which we could discuss in the present context are royalty income, fee for technical services income, and the general residual category of business income. Now, royalty taxation or fee for technical services taxation, for that, the Income Tax Act says that if these payments are made by an Indian resident to a non-resident, then India has a right to levy tax on this income because this is deemed as an India-sourced income. The rate of tax is 10% on a gross basis. If the nature of payment is neither royalty nor FTS, then the third bucket is business income. And a business income arising to a non-resident is taxable in India only if the non-resident has a taxable presence or a permanent establishment or a business connection, which is a concept under domestic tax laws. So if a US company or a non-resident has a taxable presence in India in any form, then only its business income, which it earns from India, is taxable in India. Now, if we look at payments of this nature for online advertisements, the question is, will these payments fall within the purview of any of these three income streams and the corresponding source rules? Answer to that would be a no, because these payments are actually not giving the India company any right in the intellectual property owned by the US Co, or a right to the India company over the server, or a right to operate the server owned by the US company. So because of that, the payment could not be treated as royalty. Whether it could be treated as fee for technical services, again, answer to that would be a no, because in the jurisprudence in this context under Indian tax law, it has been held that for services which are rendered digitally or only using technological means will not be subject to tax as fee for technical services, because the human element is absent there. The third category will be a business presence or a taxable presence in India. So in this fact pattern where US company has no presence in India, server is also outside India, US company will not have a taxable presence in India. Therefore, under the Income Tax Act, the scope of source rules was not wide enough to capture payments of this nature. Therefore, government introduced this levy called as equalization levy for online advertisement services. And interestingly, this equalization levy framework is kept outside the Income Tax Act, and it's a separate and an independent code. And why that was done, that we will discuss in the course of the presentation. So therefore, this was introduced as a separate code. Income tax principles will not apply. The separate code will apply. And here, of course, the non-resident need not have a taxable presence, etc. in India. And income was on that basis taxable in India so long as it is payment for online advertisement services. Moving on to the next slide, let's look at what the new or the wider scope of equalization levy is, which has been introduced by Finance Act 2020, and it is in force from 1st April 2020. Now, it is levied on non-resident e-commerce operators, and operators have been defined to mean someone who owns, operates, or manages a digital or electronic facility or a platform for online sale of goods or online provision of services. Here, what is important to note is that for an e-commerce operator, it's not necessary that it is selling the goods that it owns or providing services on its own. Even if it is facilitating sale or supply by any other person, then also it will be captured within the purview of e-commerce levy, equalization levy on e-commerce sale or supply. When we look at the service recipient, the way the law defines them, it says so long as the service recipient is an Indian resident or persons using an Indian IP address. So it's more to do with users based in India or physically located in India than necessarily their tax residence in India. And in certain circumstances, even non-resident to non-resident transactions would also be covered within the purview of equalization levy, which we will deal with on the next slide. There are certain exceptions, as per which if e-commerce operator has a taxable presence or a permanent establishment in India, then equalization levy will not apply. And why? Because that gets covered in the income tax itself, so the separate code will not be relevant. And where the annual taxable turnover of the e-commerce operator is less than 20 million Indian rupees, it will not be subject to equalization levy. And the third exception is where the services are of a nature which fall within the purview of the 6% levy, which is online advertisement services. So there, since already a levy of 6% is there, it will not attract the 2% levy. Now, if all these boxes are ticked, then the equalization levy of 2% is payable by the non-resident e-commerce operator on the consideration that it receives for online sale or supply of services or facilitation of such online sale or supply. Now, if we go to the next slide, that captures the non-resident to non-resident business arrangements which would trigger this equalization levy. The circumstances include sale of advertisement targeting Indian resident customers, or where such advertisements are accessed by persons using an Indian IP address. So again, the focus is on user base in India. So if the sale is targeted at Indian customers, advertisements are targeted at Indian customers, or advertisements are accessed by persons using IP address, then such NR to NR transactions will also be subject to equalization levy of 2%. And arrangements where non-resident e-commerce operator is selling and monetizing
I think we may have lost Ritu for the moment. What we can do is we can move on to the next slides. Vinita, would you like to take it forward from the businesses which are likely to be impacted by these new expanded scope of the levy?
Definitely, sure. Next slide, please. So, as Ritu was mentioning, the new equalization levy is going to impact the businesses which are in online industry, whether they are giving an online supply of a product or it is an online service. And even in certain circumstances where the non-resident is giving an advertisement sale of data, or he's selling an advertisement, even in those circumstances, even though it is completely happening offshore, there can be tax. So analyzing that, to our mind, we thought these are the broad industries which could be impacted. To start with, the cloud computing industry, where the service provider would be giving software as a service or platform as a service, or at times an infrastructure as a service. In either case, in layman's term, if I have to give you an example, like I'm accessing a Dropbox or storage where there is a cloud storage, those service providers would need to keep their watch guard to see whether they will be impacted. The second is subscription providers, where today, if I want to watch a movie, I have so many applications where we pay a subscription fee and watch those content online. And in certain cases, like lawyers like us also go to a legal database to do our legal analysis, where the all we do is just download the content which is available online. Even those industries may be impacted. Now, nevertheless, there are various players where they themselves have set up an Indian presence, but still any transaction between their Indian presence and the foreign entity would also need to pass the same test as they were directly doing with the Indian customers. And the third category we thought was the online marketplace. And everyone, all said and done in this tough times, something which comes to our rescue is the online marketplace is still available, whereby we are getting our delivery of goods. And even in those cases, if a non-resident is having an online marketplace abroad, but if there is an Indian customer or an Indian user having an Indian USP registered IP, you would need to be impacted by this. And the last category is the general social media, where we may be doing an aimless browsing. But by the way, if we come across any ads which is placed by a foreign non-resident, whether it can impact the non-resident person is also something they need to keep in mind. And other important is when these search engines or social media companies, many times there is data which is being given by the customers or the users when when they browse, they may be giving a lot of their personal data. Now, how those data, in case it is being utilized and it is being sold by the non-resident, there can still be an impact. Definitely we'll also understand the interplay between the data privacy laws and how it is going to really impact in terms of equalization levy on the other hand. Next slide, please. When we look at this example, example 1, it's a plain vanilla example where scenario 1 is the US company which is outside India, has a cloud access, it owns a cloud, and there is an entity which is totally unrelated. This is called as ABC India. ABC India is paying fees to the US entity for accessing the server and the software application. In this situation, whether now the ABC India entity would need to keep in mind that what payments it is making to USCO, whether it qualifies as an equalization levy or whether it qualifies as a royalty. When we look at the broad provisions of equalization levy, going forward, the US company would need to pay an equalization levy on the fees which is being given by ABC India. Here, there is an important consideration that whether because the law is very clear, US company needs to pay, and as Ritu had mentioned, from US company's perspective, the moment it is subject to equalization levy, there is no tax it needs to pay in India as income tax. Whether by that fact, whether ABC India can be very relaxed that there is no implication for it and entire implication is on the US entity, perhaps the answer is not so straightforward while the law is very clear. ABC India itself would need to look into what was the positions taken and whether it results in any use of IP, and it also needs to have a certain documentation in its favor saying that how US entity is going to say that it is subject to equalization levy and not income tax. So those are some checks and balances which as an Indian payer you would need to keep in mind. Now, as a variance to this example, instead of USCO giving to ABC India, we have introduced ABC Co, which is a related party of ABC India, which is again a very common structure which we have seen where ABC Co has entered into an agreement with the US entity, whereby the US entity itself would be giving a software usage of cloud to ABC Co, and ABC Co in turn would be giving to ABC India. And this is normally given as part of the master service agreement. So here there is a question where there is a utilization of the cloud access being used by the Indian entity, but whether who should be paying the equalization levy, whether it should be or whether it should be the ABC Co. The answer is not so straightforward. It would depend on the terms of arrangement what ABC Co has with USCO and what is the role of ABC India in terms of the interface between ABC India and USCO. To give you an example, if ABC, while in the master service agreement, if ABC is also mentioned, while though not as a party, but if it is clearly being brought out that ABC would be utilizing it and it is acting on a principal to principal basis, then perhaps it's the USCO which is responsible to pay the equalization levy. Whereas if it is very clearly given that it's basically a transaction between USCO and ABC, and where thereafter it is totally an related transaction between ABC Co and ABC India, perhaps it would be ABC Co which would be responsible, as what happened between USCO and ABC Co is a transaction happening between two non-resident, and unless you are covered in those specified circumstances as Ritu mentioned, you would not be hit by that. So the takeaway is in any kind of master service arrangement, it's very important to decide it is whose responsibility. Because even in a situation where we say ABC Co, it is a responsibility of ABC Co to pay the equalization levy. Again, ABC Co need to be mindful when it makes payment to USCO, whether USCO would be subject to any royalty payment tax in India, because ultimately the IP is going to be used in India if it results in any use of IP. So this is something which clients should keep in mind as and when they look into such services. Can we move on to the next slide, please? The next example is where we are talking about a use of a database, where it's a thing where the US entity has it's a subscription-based entity which has a customers in India. We may be accessing the database. So the US entity is technically required to pay the equalization levy. Again, it becomes a cost which they need to keep in mind. And the basis the data which they have collected. Now, if they go on to sell those data to US company too, in the given example, even on that sale, which has like it's happening totally offshore, and to really feel whether the data is linked with India or not, even in this circumstances, USCO 1 is required to pay the equalization levy. So you can see the ramification it has, even though the transaction is happening between USCO 1, USCO 2, but the data is collected from the persons who are resident in India or someone who's using an IP address in India. You would be still be hit by the equalization levy provisions. Now, in this regard, I have a very specific question to our partner Supratim. Supratim, I believe you have been very closely following the upcoming personal data protection bill. Could you please let us know about the whole concern about what is the issue regarding the data localization and how it has been addressed in the upcoming data protection bill?
Yeah, thank you, Vinita. I think very pertinent question here in light of the subject that we are covering today and overall global scenario. Data localization, has been there in several jurisdictions. So basically, it is the localization or residency of the data within that country, and there's several theories around this. Okay, one is the trade theory, that is my data, my oil, and I would use it the way I want it to be. The other important theory is the security theory, which is basically that for security reasons, my government should have access to the data, and therefore it should be available. At least a serving copy or a mirror copy should be available within the country. So this has been looming large in the mind of the government for quite some time, and if you see, there are several regulations, draft laws, policies, etc., which have been coming out, which has localization written all over. Okay. For example, let's talk about the Reserve Bank of India's dicta to payment systems to localize all their data within the country. And some of these concerns are not really very misfounded, because we have seen some of the important investigations getting stuck because Indian government then is trying to reach out to a foreign player, and the foreign player reverting, saying that the only way that the data of Indian individuals can be handed over for the purposes of that particular inquiry is through mutual legal assistance treaty, which is a long drawn process, approximately about 18 months. So there are valid justifications to some extent. But coming to your specific question, so Vinny, there has been a lot of to and fro on this one. The initial thought process of Justice Sri Krishna was that we should have complete localization, that is, personal data should essentially be stored within the country. And the way it was crafted in the previous version of the bill was that personal data was largely to be kept within the country, at least a mirror copy or a serving copy to be kept within the country. Sensitive personal data also in the same league, but in certain circumstances, both of these could have crossed the border. Then there was a category of data called critical data set, which could never leave the country, minus very, very minuscule possibilities. After that, Justice Sri Krishna committee handed over this particular bill to the ministry and then it was tabled in the parliament, and that version that we see, which is the Personal Data Protection Bill 2019, has three categories again. One is personal data, which can now freely go outside the country. This is because of the amount of lobbying that happened, that can be freely sent outside the country. Sensitive personal data should ordinarily be stored within the country, but it can go out in certain circumstances, such as having explicit consent, or if there are intra-group schemes which are approved by the authority, so on and so forth. And again, critical data set can never leave the country. So that is where we are. It is still getting, the bill is still getting deliberated in the Joint Parliamentary Committee. We have also given our inputs in relation to this particular element. Let's see what comes up. Back to you, Vinita.
Thanks a ton, Supratim, for the insightful update on the data protection bill. In the same example, just to complete the loop, there is also in the same entity, say USCO 1, if it is just giving and giving an advertisement platform to the customers in India, then it would be governed by the old equalization levy, where the responsibility to pay the equalization levy is on the Indian customers. Can we please move on to the next slide? In this slide, we see an example where we have a foreign entity, Japanese entity, which owns a platform, and there are non-resident sellers who are owners of the products. They are listing their products on the website, and the customers like you and me are accessing the website sitting in India, or it can also be someone who's not an Indian resident, but he has come to India, uses an Indian IP address, accesses those websites, and it purchases the goods. So even in this case, the Japanese entity, while it is not the owner of the products, it is only a facilitator or a platform owner, would be required to pay an equalization levy at the rate of 2%. So here, which are very interesting questions come up. One is when we look at from the Japanese entity's perspective, technically the remuneration which it is going to keep is only a listing fee or a facilitation fee, whereas the sale consideration for the goods actually belongs to the sellers in the given example. But when we look at the provisions of the equalization levy, there is no clarity as of now. Perhaps the Japanese entity may be required to pay 2% equalization levy on the entire consideration, which the customers would be paying to the sellers. There is another thing which we have noted, which is very common, at least it happens with me. We buy products online, and the moment it comes to us, what we see or it didn't fit us, and we want to refund it back or return it back. And the websites are also very friendly in terms of their written policy, and they do take back the products back. So in this regard, what is the situation? Whether there will be any scope for the Japanese entity which has paid an equalization levy, whether can it get back as a refund? Now I see Ritu is back on the panel. May I request Ritu to please give her views in this regard?
Sure. Thanks, Vinita. So I think currently the way equalization levy provisions are drafted, it does not recognize a refund mechanism in scenarios where sale or supply is reversed and therefore customers are refunded their money. And hence, e-commerce operator can take a position that such transactions should not be made subject to equalization levy. So while, of course, fine print doesn't capture that scenario expressly, but I think we should wait and watch for the filing, the form of the return which the e-commerce operator needs to file. If those forms clarify and have some disclosures with respect to such refund transaction, then of course the position will be clearer. But as a concept, yes, e-commerce operators should be able to claim a refund subject to how these practical, situation pans out in terms of the form filing, etc.
Very helpful, Ritu. And quickly, just to recap, instead of a foreign entity having a marketplace, it's replaced by the Indian marketplace providers, where the scenario remains the same. Here, the Indian marketplace is not required to pay an equalization levy, but there is a new tax which was brought in the recent budget, which is Indian marketplace is required to deduct tax when they receive the proceeds on the sale of products from the customers. players. So again, going forward, the Indian entities who are the market players would need to keep this in mind when they are collecting the transaction, because again, it is very interesting to note both in the online market players, if it was an offshore entity technically selling the goods in an offline model, like if I had placed an order which had just come to me by ship, there is a position that there is no tax because everything is happening outside India. Whereas in an online model, that is being taxed. And similarly, in an Indian marketplace, normally if I sell a good or purchase a good, there is no withholding tax obligation generally. But here there is a withholding tax obligation. Yes, there are certain safe harbor in terms of the turnover, all that, but that is also being brought as TDS. Now, since we see Ritu is back, maybe Ritu can, just quickly take up the slides which was left.
Sure. So if we can go to the previous slide where we were discussing NR to NR scenarios, which will be subject matter of equalization levy. So such scenarios include a sale of advertisements targeting Indian customers or where such advertisements are accessed by Indian IP users. That sale between two non-residents will be subject to equalization levy. And also sale of data collected from Indian residents or Indian IP users between two non-residents where the seller is a non-resident e-commerce operator. That will also be subject to equalization levy. Moving on to the next slide, if we can quickly look at a quick comparison between online advertisement 6% levy and the new 2% levy on e-commerce sale and supply. The real difference is from a compliance standpoint, where 6% levy is a form of a withholding tax where the payer is withholding the tax and remitting the balance to the non-resident. But the new e-commerce 2% levy, the payer has no obligation. It is the recipient e-commerce operator who has to ensure that it complies with its Indian tax obligations of payment of the equalization levy, deposit of tax, filing of statements, etc. So the main difference is from a compliance standpoint and also the rate of tax. It's the online advertisement one is 6% and this one is 2% on the consideration received by an e-commerce operator. Looking at the next slide, we have summarized the compliances for both the 6% levy and 2% levy. The compliance for the 6% levy is a monthly compliance and the tax needs to be deposited within 7 days of the following month. While the 2% levy, e-commerce operators need to deposit that on a quarterly basis. And for the quarter ending 31st March, that's the last quarter of the Indian financial year, the tax needs to be deposited by 31st March. Any delay in deposit will attract interest at the rate of 1% per month and penalty equivalent to the amount of equalization levy which has not been paid. In terms of return filing, for the 6% levy, there's an annual return filing of by 30th June of the following year. Similarly, it is for the 2% levy as well, but here the compliance will be by the e-commerce operator and any delay could attract penalty and in certain cases prosecution. Now, from a compliance standpoint, one point that everyone should note is the rep assessee risk for the payers. Now, when we look at the 6% levy, that is in the form of withholding tax. So there, of course, payers have an obligation to ensure that they pay proper taxes while making remittance to the online advertisement service providers. But for the e-commerce transaction space, payers have no obligation. The obligation is on the e-commerce operator. But if you look at the legal framework, there is a provision which says that if non-resident defaults or doesn't comply with its tax payment obligation, etc., then tax authorities could treat the payers as representative assessees or agents of the non-resident to recover the pending tax dues. Of course, it's not that straightforward, not that every payer could be treated as an agent of the non-resident. It will depend on facts and circumstances, the transaction, scale of transactions, etc. But keeping the retail users aside, but large players in this space, when the transactions are on large scale and on a regular basis, the payers should seek some sort of comfort where they have, contractual indemnities in place and they have some visibility on the e-commerce tax compliances in India so that their risk goes down.
Yeah, and just to add, since Ritu rightly said, equalization levy is not an income tax, even from a due diligence perspective, or from an when we look at insurers when they are doing a rep and warranty insurance, or from a buyer's perspective, they need to specifically see the definition of tax to see, because as Ritu rightly mentioned, there are compliances and consequences in case you fail to other.
Right.
Uh, Thanks a lot, Ritu and Vinita and Supratim for just taking us through the legal provisions and making them really come alive with your, detailed illustrations from an impact standpoint as well. If I were to really look at still what are possibly some key considerations which may still be unattended or may need further discussions, Ritu, while you mentioned that income tax levy and equalization levy are two separate taxes as such, but do we really see an intersection between the two? You briefly mentioned that, and even in Vinita's example, we came across where a royalty may get mixed up with an equalization levy now, and how does that really interplay with a treaty override situation and a foreign tax credit really, because it's after all a tax on the foreign service provider. So do we see some ray of hope in reducing this cost?
Right. So Jimmy, let's take each of these issues one by one. So income tax interplay, of course, that continues to be there, particularly for those services which could be treated as giving the user right in the IP, let's say software transactions. And in the software space, of course, India has seen considerable litigation where tax authorities would want to call it royalty, but taxpayers would say that no, I don't have a right in the IP, and therefore it's not royalty, but just business income. And generally, given that India and Indian law has very strict withholding tax obligation, the Indian payers would typically take conservative positions. And even if there are arguments to say that this payment should not be royalty because it's just a sale or supply of software and not rights in the software, payers were still taking a position and withholding tax, treating the payments as royalty so that they don't face an Indian tax challenge going forward. So I think in those transactions and similarly going forward, this analysis will continue to play a critical role to analyze whether a particular payment is falling within the purview of Income Tax Act provisions as royalty payouts, or is it something which is purely a subject matter of equalization levy? Because Income Tax Act does recognize, and there is an express exemption which says that payments which have been subject to equalization levy will not be subject to income tax. So while law has some basic framework to ensure that there's no double taxation, but the factual analysis with legal principles will play a role as to whether we think that the service is more appropriately falling within the purview of the royalty characterization or equalization levy sort of characterization. And here, why this distinction is relevant, because for royalty, the tax rate is 10% on a gross basis, while equalization levy is just 2% on a gross basis. So the tax difference is also quite substantial. Now, on the tax treaty override, of course, like we all discussed, equalization levy is a separate code. It's not part of the Income Tax Act. And one of the objectives why it was done was to ensure that equalization levy provisions are not subject to the beneficial provisions of tax treaties, because tax treaties yet do not recognize such digital transactions as subject matter of taxation in the source country. So let's say there is a transaction which is subject to equalization levy, but the tax treaties do not deal with that taxation right as to which country should have the right to tax that income. That triggers another issue of foreign tax credits. So the question is, in the home jurisdiction of, let's say, the e-commerce operator, will the government of that country be okay allowing credit of equalization levy paid in India? Now, the question is, of course, is a larger policy question, because here what has happened is India has introduced a provision which does not take into consideration the bilateral negotiation on tax positions. And therefore, the home country of the e-commerce operator may not be okay giving up its own tax base in favor of India by giving a credit of taxes paid in India, where this levy has not been made subject to bilateral negotiations and to basically discuss which country should have right to tax this income. So this is a larger question, and I think globally jurisdictions will have to deal with this question. And until and unless there's a global consensus on how to deal with this, this will remain an open issue and could be an additional cost of doing business in India.
Thank you, Ritu. Very well articulated, actually. If we can move to the next slide, I believe that listening to all of this discussion regarding the overarching scope of this levy, really, I think each and every business having anything to do with the internet is affected in India. Not just in India, of course, the levy is on the foreign service providers, so they need to be all the more vigilant now on a going forward basis to really see if they have to pay equalization levy in India. In fact, I just realized that as we speak, the mechanism in which we are really interacting with each other right now and having a webinar with our audience, I'm sure that there is an equalization levy triggered somewhere abroad, where the service is essentially originating from. So that's something that I think leaves room open for foreign service providers to really reassess their business model, including assessing their physical presence in India. Given that it by and large appears to be a cost of doing business in India, Ritu, I'm just borrowing from what you mentioned about a difficulty in obtaining even a foreign tax credit for such equalization levy. The pricing with regard to India-centric products is also something which I believe would be very important for foreign service providers, and which may ultimately culminate into an increased or a rather reduced bottom line for Indian service utilizers, really. Secondly, as Vinita mentioned, given that NR to NR, non-resident to non-resident sale of data is also captured within the purview of equalization levy, and so is an IP-based activity, Indian IP-based activity covered as such. The foreign service providers would really need to recalibrate their systems and figure out a way of capturing these transactions in the first place to be able to really pay an equalization levy thereafter. That's an important consideration for them. Again, from a policy dialogue standpoint, it becomes very important for especially offshore offline sellers as such to really see whether there is any unintended consequence of them being included in equalization levy just because a part of their leg of a transaction may be conducted online. So that I believe leaves enough room open to really engage with the government on an active basis. In these times, of course, it will be on a virtual basis, I believe, but yeah, it does merit enough amount of dialogue in our view. We do have some time left for our Q&As. In fact, what I see is that there were a couple of questions regarding the compliance requirements and the consequences for not complying with equalization levy for a non-resident e-commerce service provider. We are happy to inform that we have covered it in the slide which has already been discussed by Ritu, and of course this slide will continue to be shared with you after the webinar ends. So that's one question which we believe we have already captured. If we move on to a couple of other repetitive questions, in fact, that we have got from our audience. One of them is Ritu, or rather Vinita, if you could help us understand that while the scope is well understood, that it is to cover even an NR to NR sale of data or a non-resident service provider providing advertisement services to a non-resident which targets India. But how do we really see it pan out from a tracking perspective? Because how much of an access does the Indian government really have to even track a transaction like this otherwise?
So it's a very important question. So as Supratim had highlighted, that government is already engaging in talks with various players for the data localization perspective, and which also may require them to have a formal presence in India. Apart from that, maybe the way the remittance happens, or there is an annual information reporting systems, or the tax audit may need to be getting tweaked to capture this data.
Okay, that's very helpful. So I believe there is some amount of evolution which is expected even from a tracking perspective. Quickly taking another question, this question says that does this mean that game downloads, in-game purchases will also be subject to tax? And if yes, then who will pay such tax? Because by and large, we see that there are platform play stores through which such games are really delivered to Indian customers.
So again, a very interesting question. Like if you see the target which equalization levy is to be paid by a person who's called as an e-commerce operator, and he has to be a non-resident. So in the given example, if the app is where the customers are downloading and paying a fee, it will be the app which would need to pay the equalization levy.
Okay, okay. We have another question. Ritu, why don't you take this? The question is that if the foreign e-commerce operator is still subject to tax, even if they have a permanent establishment in India, then do intercompany transactions for, say, email servers would also be subject to equalization levy?
Right. So in cases where e-commerce operator has a permanent establishment in India, in that case, equalization levy will not apply. The General Income Tax Act provisions will apply read with the applicable tax treaty. So that answers the first part of the question, that in case of a PE in India, equalization levy will not apply to the non-resident e-commerce operator. So let's say they do not have a PE in India, what happens to the email servers being shared intercompany? So there I would think that again we need to test where the where the company is sharing a space on the server. That could be treated as an online facility. And if any service is provided through that facility, even providing that space could be treated as an online supply of services. In those cases, yes, equalization levy could apply. Now, whether the intention is just to cover B2B, B2B, B2C, while some doubts are being expressed as to what is the intention, but if we look at the provisions, the text of the provisions do not give any indication that one is to be included and the other is to be included. So where servers are shared, so long as the e-commerce operator meets the criteria and the definition prescribed in law and doesn't have a taxable presence in India, it could attract equalization levy for such intercompany transactions as well.
Understood. Understood. We have quickly room for one more question. Vinita, I would request you if you can take this. Thank you, Ritu. We have just one room for one final question. Vinita, I'll request you to take that up. The question is that is GST and equalization levy, do both continue to apply, or I mean, is there an interplay we see there, or is it an addition to GST cost, if any?
So the technical answer is equalization levy is separate and additional than GST. But the saving grace may be perhaps GST may not always apply in such transactions. And the larger question would be in certain situations, if it is made applicable, I mean GST, then from a non-resident operator's perspective, be the base on which he needs to pay the equalization levy, whether it should be inclusive of GST or it should be a base which does not consider GST. Again, there is a lack of clarity. One could take some hints from the law which is given in the context of domestic withholding tax, where it has been specifically given that such indirect tax should be excluded while computing the TDS liability.
Understood. Understood. So a fair bit of clarity still, but of course, it would be good for the government to really come out with something clearer for the avoidance of any doubts. Ritu, Vinita, if you could also take up this next one. It says that what about transfer pricing provisions? I mean, is there any scope for that in equalization levy? Does that also need to apply? Where do we stand on that?
So very interesting question. So when we look from equalization levy or the non-resident operator's perspective, assuming he becomes a related party, technically there are no transfer pricing provisions which are enabled in the equalization provisions. But when we look from the payee's perspective, say in my first example, which I took, say the Indian entity is a related entity when it makes the payment, it would still be required to comply with transfer pricing because it is claiming a normal tax deduction, and that is emanating from a general income tax provision.
Understand. So yeah, mix of both, especially given that transfer pricing applies, you are right, that the Indian entity pretty much remains uh, within the purview of it. That's very helpful to know actually. Um, Another question, and I think I would like to pose this to both you and Ritu actually. It's more on the practical side that are we expecting the government to really come out with any clarifications or detailed guidelines to really get a better touch and feel of the scope of this law? Because the more I hear about it, I believe that I should probably stop using the internet, maybe in the benefit of a foreign service provider probably.
Right. So, Jimmy, if I can go first, I do feel that the whole royalty versus equalization levy interplay, we could expect some clarity there because the tax incidence is very different. The persons who have to pay that tax is different. Entire framework is different where the payment falls under one bucket and not the other, or for overlapping sort of services. So I think that's an area which definitely one expects that government will clarify as to what happens in those situations.
If I may add, there are two things which quickly comes to my mind. Is one is the facilitation fee versus the gross consideration, which I had touched upon in my example. And the second important thing is, while Ritu had mentioned that in non-residents, when you sell a data to another non-resident, you would need to cough up the equalization levy in India. So there are multiple interpretations in terms of what do you mean by when you are selling a data which is targeted at Indian customers. If there is some clarity which has been explained, and also in the same example, if the non-resident has globally, it collects data from various locations, then how do we quantify and say this is Indian data is something which I would look forward to a clarity from the government side.
That's very interesting and helpful, Vinita. Thank you, Ritu. Um, Supratim, I believe this is a question which you may be best pleased to answer, and the question relates to localization of servers of foreign companies in India and the policy stand that we really are at in India. I understand that we may possibly not have codified anything so far, but I see that the question has a feel and flavor of a permanent establishment for a foreign entity otherwise, if the server is in India. So, where do we stand from a regulatory standpoint as far as having servers in India is concerned for foreign entities?
Right. So, as I was mentioning in the initial part of this discussion, localization is looming large in the mind of the government, and they have given several justifications in order to state that this is good for the country, including, having better infrastructures and more employment in the country. Of course, there is a push to have server farms and, have localization, but there is a counter force also which is acting here, and that is, as I told you, because of which we saw that from the previous version of the personal data protection bill to the present version, there has been a change, there has been a dilution of the stance on localization. But having said that, even sectoral regulators have gotten activated quite a bit. So one example I gave you of the Reserve Bank of India giving its diktat to the payment system providers. Uh, Apart from that, so this is your answer, but apart from that, one important element I would like to also flag out is that um, the extraterritorial applicability of the personal data protection bill. This is a very important one to take note of, because what are the buckets under which, even if it's a foreign player, that entity could get covered under the purview of the bill. And there are three categories. One is business, if business is carried out in India. Now this is a very vague and very flimsy phrase, I would say. We have requested the joint parliamentary committee also to put in more meat around this. Then we also have the other category, systematic activity of offering goods or services to data principals, that is data subjects in the country. And the last one is profiling of data principals or data subjects in the country. These last two are akin to the European law, that is the European General Data Protection Regulation. But the first one is very unique. Business carried out in India, though it could, so any business could just get categorized under that. So that's it from my side. Back to you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Supratim. I think this has been quite insightful because, as you may have already seen, and our audience has been very keenly listening, that for entities which have a permanent establishment in India, this levy particularly doesn't apply. So we'll have to closely monitor the developments as to what extent do they really want something to really happen from an Indian server, and then take a call about really restructuring, if at all, a business model as such from an Indian standpoint. Thank you very much for that, Supratim. This has been very helpful. Um, I am afraid that we are now running short of time. We do have received a lot of questions, but we'll surely take them up separately over an email. Do rest assured about it. Um, I hope that you found this webinar interesting and a worthwhile investment of your time. We certainly enjoyed bringing it to you, and it has been keeping us busy for some time. And given the shape and form it is in, it is going to keep us busy for some more time, I believe. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact any of our speakers or me. Our contact details are right on the screen in front of you. We would like to receive feedback on this webinar separately as well. Currently, we have put up a short poll on your screen, which is visible right now. This poll is available on your screen for about 30 to 40 seconds. You can select an option by clicking it on your screen. And as everyone responds to this poll, I also inform you, when you close this webinar, a short survey will open in your browser. We'll be grateful if you can fill up that short survey as well. As you can tell, your feedback is taken very, very seriously at our end, and it only helps us get better and better at what we do. And I'll also say that, just repeat that the presentation and the webinar will be emailed to you separately after this session ends. I believe the poll has now closed. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot for your feedback. With that, a final thank you and a good day. Bye-bye.